Good evening. I'm Daniel Walker, and I'm going to be presenting my research topic for intergovernmental relations. I've chosen to talk about homeland defense because I believe it is not only a really interesting subject for me as far as being involved in it personally, but also a very relevant topic, not only in an election year, but also being in the current state of conflict that our country is in. It's something that happens to touch each and every one of us, not only directly if you know someone who serves in the military, but also indirectly, because whether it is that person that you know that is being sent overseas, it is most certainly your money that is being used to finance the conflicts that we are currently involved in. So I think it is something that is worth studying and something that is worth looking at as far as the lens of intergovernmental relations is concerned. So to start out with, I'll bring it back to the very origins of the class itself, in which we started out by talking about the Federalist Papers. I was really interested in that start out because the Federalist Papers really outlined the argument for both decentralization and centralization of government functions. And when we look back at it, the entire reason why we declared independence was to get away from monarchy, which is the ultimate form of centralization, where the decision-making execution of a country is left to a single individual. And anytime you consolidate power to such a level, whether it be an individual or a small group of people, you run into the risk of losing, whether forever or temporarily, accountability of that individual or that small group of people and their decisions. So when they make a decision that is detrimental to the country, usually the consequences come from an external factor, and the accountability is lost from the individual citizen. So when we talk about the United States, we look at our republic and we think that the government is accountable to the people, and the government's decisions should be reflective of the will of the people. And I want to look at homeland defense and ask whether our homeland defense and our foreign policy and our domestic policy that dictates our homeland defense strategy and the national security apparatus really reflects the will of the people. And if not, what can we do about that? So I've talked about the idea of accountability, and I feel like that is the ultimate question right now. I'll get to my thesis here in a second. But how does our moving towards a centralized mode of national security really affect our accountability? So in 6th grade, 7th grade, in civics class, we learned that the entire reason why we have the three branches of government in the form of the republic that we have is to establish accountability, not only within the federal government, but to make sure that the federal government is linked to the state government and the state government is linked to the local government. And through those lines of political communication, the individual can, either by joining up in groups or casting a vote to select a representative or president, affect the direction and the decision-making of the nation. Got it. In this particular instance, in Homeland Security, Homeland Defense, something that projects itself outwards. Yes, the individual citizen day to day will not be making strategic, operational, and tactical decisions as far as conflict is concerned, but there are ways to ensure that the government is accountable to the individual citizen, and I want to really take a look at as to whether our current state of conflict is ensuring that. So here's the scenario. The United States has been at war for about 15 years. There have been tens, if not hundreds, of thousands of people killed in those conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, name your place. There have been X amount of numbers of troops deployed from both America and Europe to almost every continent on the planet in order to fight this quote-unquote war on terror that has started really since September 12th, 2001. And through those conflicts, there have been numerous geopolitical and economic ramifications, not only for us and our allies, but also those that we have deemed collaborators and cooperators of terrorism. A very broad name for things as it is. But the world itself has now been entangled in this fight to get terrorism under control. And so all of this is not purely external either. So there isn't only the The fact that every decision that the United States makes in order to ensure its national security and its defense of its homeland affects our allies, obviously. It also affects us because, as I said earlier, it's not only our sons and daughters being sent over there overseas to go and fight this conflict, it's also your treasure. The United States is spending blood and treasure to accomplish a goal as far as terrorism is concerned. And now, not only do you have to worry about the blood and treasure, but that threat of terrorism has expanded our national security apparatus to a point where it also affects the way that the federal government treats its citizens. You think about the USA Patriot Act, you think about Real ID, you talk about policies that are affected on the homeland that affect you and me alike, whether we're fighting in this war or not. And so what that's caused is one, civil unrest, not on the levels of Vietnam or anything, and we'll talk about why that is here a little later on, but also confusion. 15 years is about enough time to give birth to someone. It is enough time to give birth to someone, but for them to also grow up and to begin their adolescence having never not known war, having never not known a nation that has been at war. It's also enough time to get your citizenship to a point where it has forgotten what peace is like. It has also forgotten what it feels like to not be in a constant state of some sort of fear and some sort of aggression, which is a problem. So people start to ask questions like, who are we fighting? Why are we fighting them? Why does it cost so much? How do we get ourselves out of this? Can we get ourselves out of this? Who should we be afraid of? Is it them or is it the government? And ultimately there is a distrust that has been bred within the citizenship for its government, and then there's also been a divisiveness between those that know who we're fighting and why we're fighting, and those that do not. And that is something that, whether it is flower power on the lawn of Woodstock somewhere that happens in a very explosive way with demonstrations that can tear a country apart, or it's something that over time can degrade patriotism in the most purest form. It can also degrade people's identity as far as Americans and what they choose to support from here on out. So that's why it's important so far, and that's where we stand at the current moment. So where we also stand is the national security apparatus is no longer, in my view, and this is the thesis that I'm going with, the national security apparatus is no longer accountable to the American citizen. It is rogue and it has run amok. Its meddling is sufficiently external at this point to where the individual citizen probably either doesn't know what truly goes on a day-to-day basis internationally and domestically, or there's so much twist, there's so much going on at any given moment that they can't comprehend it and they don't care. And they've become numb to what it is that's going on with this country as far as its homeland, its defense is concerned. And that's what I plan to look into with this research topic. How can I prove this? One, I want to look at the basics, which is how long has this country been at war without congressional approval? Our Constitution is written pretty plainly as far as who has the power to allow us to go to war, and that's Congress. And we haven't declared war in a very long time. Certainly not 2001. Where's the money coming from? Where's it all going? And what really happens to those dollars if the money and the numbers don't add up? Who gets held accountable for that? I have to look into that. So we're looking at Afghanistan, Iraq, and other conflicts in the last 15 to 20 years to look at that, so where it doesn't span a whole 40 years of research. But I want to look at the cost of those wars, the reasoning for those wars, and what happens when the costs don't add up and the reasoning doesn't add up. Who gets held accountable when the federal government is wrong about the decisions that it makes? What happens when the money that the taxpayer spends is not accounted for properly? And then finally, I want to talk about who cares about any of this. And as far as continuing the lines of research, who's approving what? What does your senator say? What does your representative say? And does that actually reflect statistically or otherwise what it is that you think? And hopefully through that, I can prove whether or not our national security strategy, our homeland defense, and the way that our federal government operates is accountable to the individual citizen. Thank you.